Hello there, friends. How are you doing? Hope you are all well. Let me just open up the chat so I can see you all. Welcome to the first episode of a brand new live series, Artist Questions, brought to you by Exchange Art and Bonk Art Masters. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Curtis. I'm an artist and a writer and curator based in London, in the UK. And I'm super excited to start this new series with you, where each week I'll be tackling a big question that contemporary artists are facing today. Things like, do I need gallery representation? How to price my work? How do I know when I've made it as an artist? Do I need a studio space? And more questions like these. So each week on each episode, I'll be bringing you wisdom and insight from some of the best practitioners in the arts and the creative industries generally. And I'll be interviewing guests over the series too, plus sharing with you my experience of my last 15 years, I guess, as a practicing artist, working in all areas of the arts, in all different forms, in all levels of success and failure, I guess. Um, so, for the episodes, the format's going to be simple. We'll be here for about 45 minutes, and I'll be sharing some things with you for the first half. And then for part two, it's over to you, the creative community, for your thoughts, questions, things you might have disagreed with, things you want clarification on, and to share your own wisdom, because I really want this to be a community based project. Each week I want it to feel like we're getting together as a group and encouraging each other and inspiring each other as creatives to keep going and to get the best out of our creative practice. So in terms of interaction through the episode, currently streaming on Twitter/X and YouTube as well. So if you are on either of those, on Twitter, you can just comment beneath the stream as it's going on my profile now, and I'll be able to see comments here. And also you can comment on the YouTube chat function if you're on YouTube. So yeah, feel free to send some comments now if you like. Send me some love or joy or distraction. Throw me completely off what I was trying to say, whatever you'd like to do. And yeah, you don't have to wait for the second half. When we get into discussion time, if you've got thoughts as we go through, just let me know, and I'll be able to see everything here and then bring it up on screen as well, so we can discuss some things together. Well then, now that the intros are done and you know the format, let's look at our first question for our first episode. Today we're discussing, are other artists community or competition? Now, this can be a tough one, actually. And it's a difficult one. And I wanted to start big with something like this because it's a difficult one, because it's not something we necessarily share with others, these kind of thoughts. Um, the ideas of stepping back and looking at ourselves a bit and our motivations and where we're at in our practice at the moment, and the kind of thoughts that we might have, which are like looking at other artists and their professional life and the way they're presenting themselves online and thinking, why is it that they have this but I don't have it? Why do they have this huge studio, these all these sales, this seemingly endless opportunities that come to them? Or you might start thinking about things in a kind of competition sense, where it's, I should have had the opportunity that they have now, that should have been me. My work is better than theirs, or why did they get into that show but I didn't? And often this kind of thought process, this thought pattern of competition against other artists, lead us into internally to start thinking, what's wrong with me then, and what's wrong with my work? And it becomes a very lonely and isolating mindset to be in. Actually, it feels like you're speaking out, you're putting your work out there, and just no one gives a fuck, and you're starting to question, why am I doing all of this? And, why do they all seem to care for that artist, but not for me? Yeah. Now, I don't think this sort of feeling of comparison to others, or competition with others is, um it's not something you're necessarily feeling all the time, 100% of the time. And it will be a sliding scale in terms of how you feel about it day to day. But I think there are things in our everyday creative culture, contemporary creative culture as artists, and in the art world at large, that are making it a lot harder for us to connect with other artists and to see them as community and not competition, not someone to just compete against. So I'm going to give you a few thoughts about what I think are causing these sort of rifts, these issues in our thinking at the moment, and then let's have a discussion about it afterwards. So I want to talk about two things. First off, I want to talk about the power of social media, the dreaded social media, and the power it has over the view of ourselves as artists and our view of others. And then in the second part, I want to talk about a lack of transparency in the art world and why that's leading to this sort of competitive mindset. So, social media. Well, first of all, I want to say that, social media is incredibly useful for artists. Obviously, it's become a really important way of connecting and building opportunities. I'm streaming to social media right now. This proves the point. And sometimes, it really can be the only way that people see your work. In our contemporary age, sometimes people are seeing the work before an exhibition, or in my case, there's a lot of artists that whose work inspires me, and drives me forward, and I've never seen it in real life. And that's quite strange, really, to think about in many ways in terms of the experiential nature of art. So, I'm not smashing or knocking social media entirely. I don't want you to hear that. But, I've got loads of opportunities out of social media myself. The last two shows that I was in here in London were, off the back of connecting with other artists and social media. So, it is possible. But what I want to talk about is something that Cal Newport talks about in his book, Digital Minimalism. So Cal Newport says those use cases for which we originally started on social media are there, and I guess social media sort of apologists in a way will talk about social media on these terms. It connects us all, it brings us all together, it gives us opportunities. But what Cal Newport says is that social media has gone, and these kind of apps have gone so much further into our life than those original use cases that we got them for. And he actually describes it as they've colonized the interior of our life. Now, for artists, that means it changes the way that social media can start to change the way that we view ourselves as artist practitioners and our practice, and therefore other artists as well. So how so? How so, I hear you asking? Well, primarily, social media, I think, has had this negative impact on community building as artists, because social media, in its very essence, has us thinking as artists that we're all solopreneurs, that we're kind of all individual entities, and then we're all kind of fighting against each other for this scarce scraps of, let's say, primarily attention, which is the biggest market asset in a social media context, whether that's likes or retweets or something going viral or something getting picked up. And then so that's attention, and after that, fighting between ourselves for kind of a perceived sense of prestige and art historical importance, which again can be sort of seemingly reinforced by your tweets going viral or them being important. And then a kind of, I guess, on a third scale, it is money, finance, connecting with collectors, or feeling like we're kind of competing with each other for, the scraps of finance to come through as well. So, and because this is all sort of buried in algorithmic way of working, this fight for with this fight for attention, you're kind of pushed to turning everything into either a product to sell, or B, a brand to market. That becomes like your focus as an artist in these areas. And of course, products and brands are always competing against other products and brands by their very nature. Now, I'm not saying that branding yourself, and representing yourself well, something like that is a bad thing. Um, you know, when you begin to approach your art, particularly in a kind of professional sense, and by that I mean you're trying to get yourself out there and exhibit and connect with people, it is important that your voice, comes along, that you use social media in a way that you feel is authentic to you, and you present yourself well and competently, I guess. But the problem is when the kind of self-branding and making products of everything you do kind of leaks into your art approach and leaks into your art practice, in the sense that it infects your making and a sense of who you are as an artist, what you think you're supposed to make, and what other artists are to you. And then what ends up happening is, instead of creating from a place of, let's say, curiosity, experimentation, or, in terms of community and other artists, for connection, artists instead, by sort of the way social media runs, are pressured to constantly produce, perform, and compete with each other, right? And it creates a sort of weird tension where everything you make starts to feel like a transaction, even the connections you're making with other artists. Yeah. And if you have this kind of algorithmic logic as the foundation to your art practice, it can only lead to what I like to call a compare and despair narrative. Yeah. Where you're constantly looking at what other people are doing and despairing that that's not you. Yeah. It ends up pitting artists against one another, even subtly. Like, it can start with, well, why is their piece going viral, or getting lots of attention, and mine's not? Should I change the way I'm working to get more reach? That kind of thing. And it starts then maybe to look at it from a materialistic perspective as well. Why don't I have this huge studio that they're showing there, showing off with their photographs perfectly lit in front of their huge paintings? Why did they get into that exhibition and not me? And what happens in a compare and despair cycle is that you start to think it's something wrong with you personally. Yeah. Because we're divided into these little groups, like I say, by social media, you believe it must be to do with me then. I'm not professional enough. I'm not entrepreneurial enough. I'm not business savvy enough. My art isn't good enough. I'm not confident enough. And you can see how this is just a breeding ground for a competitive mindset. Let me just take a swig of tea. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah. I just realized I've got the wrong chat on. I was thinking, where's all the comments? Yeah. Let me just show an interesting comment here from JT. Hi, JT. Yeah, definitely fighting for attention, which sometimes forces individuals to act out of character big time. And also, I think sometimes, and I'll come to this in a minute when we talk about perception management, it's often getting artists to kind of be who they're not. And you start to say, you get this kind of toxic mind frame. Instead of what do I want to make and what's the art that's most authentic to me, you start to think, what will the market like, or what person am I supposed to be? And then, of course, because usually the most toxic stuff gets picked up, again, that's algorithmic, you might start to think, I need to be more of a toxic character, or something like that, right? Yeah, it's a really good point, JT. Thank you. And it leads into what I wanted to say next, actually, is that I don't think this is our fault. And the question is, well, what's behind all of this? Yeah, what's causing this to happen? And you guessed it, it's the ugly rearing head of capitalism, right? Because we have to understand this as artists, yeah, using social media now, especially if it's the primary way you're getting your work out there. social media, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say it so you can really hear it. Social media is not designed primarily to connect people. Yeah. Social media is designed primarily to create wealth for shareholders. Okay. At its core, it is a business model. And remember, when you don't pay for something like Instagram or Twitter, unless you're paying for extra boost on X these days because Elon's got no money. But that's another topic. But when you don't pay for a service, that means you are the product, yeah, as the user. And that's why, you know, things can be changed on, say, like Instagram without any warning, suddenly ruining people's business because we don't have any say in the game, because it's all about increasing shareholder value. It's not about increasing connectivity or useful tools for artists. Yeah. And so, far from connecting us, social media actually compartmentalizes us again into fighting for these scraps of attention, which seem to get smaller and smaller every update of the app, so that the market value of it can increase for shareholders. And I've sometimes been thinking to myself, like lately, like, how much, let's say, out of 100% of my time on social media, whether that's Instagram, X, wherever else, how much of my time in percent, let's say, has been spent on making money for shareholders? I reckon, maybe 5% of my time on social media used intentionally and getting me a connection with someone. That's 5%. I reckon 95% of the rest of the time is based on me generating wealth for others. Out of getting in a compare and despair cycle, endlessly scrolling, trying to think, oh, why have I not got these opportunities? And maybe I should try and make my studio look bigger, and whatever else. And capitalism, especially in its current late stage neoliberal form, just really thrives when people are fragmented, yeah, individualized, isolated. It's not just a side effect of capitalism, like an accident. It's basically the point of capitalism. Yeah, capitalism needs people to compete with each other rather than cooperate. It doesn't want artistic community. It wants us fighting with each other, the system encouraging us to see other artists as rivals, all scrambling for these scarce jobs, gigs, likes, exhibitions, fame, funding, sales, whatever else. Rather than seeing the system itself as the problem, it internalizes the problem and says, "Oh, it's to do with you. You're just not a good enough artist, clearly." And in fact, if you just spent more time on this app, or maybe you paid for this app to boost your post, then you would be real. Do you see what I mean? And it's just an endless cycle of solo isolation fighting, and it's hard. It takes a real effect. Okay, there's a few questions in before we come to the next size. Richard. Hi, Rich. Nice to have you on here. Do you think the competitive mindset caused by social media has bled into the traditional art space? Yeah, I mean, there's a great book called Advice for the Early Career Artist by Delphian Gallery, which is a really amazing gallery in London that prioritizes trying to share the work of other galleries and really trying to build community around what they do. And they've said in their book, which I'm going to bring into one of these spaces soon, that the middleman kind of thing is taken out by social media now. Often, an artist and a collector can have like a connection without there needing to be a gallery representation or a gallery taking a cut or something like that. So it has definitely affected the trad art scene and the market in that sense. But also, we have to remember that there really is no such thing as the art world per se, right? There are just hundreds, if not thousands, of small art worlds, and we're all in our little kind of non-connected bubbles. Again, social media works well to do that, to keep us in our sort of sectors. And like the more trad art world, if you're talking about auction houses and things like that, that's totally its own world, usually not even seen by artists. So, in a sense, there is effect, but also at the same time, the trad art world just kind of does its thing over here while we're all over here arguing on Twitter, and sometimes they just don't connect at all. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of both, you know. Another question here from JT. So, what do you feel artists can do to help stay true to themselves while also getting some level of attention and my work seen by more people? I think on one level, I'm going to speak a bit more about this in a minute, but on one level, you need to decide as an artist what like attention means for you. Because realistically, even if I had a post, let's say on Instagram, of one of my sculptures that went viral, let's say at a very low level, got 100,000 likes on it or something, what does that mean to me in reality? Does it mean exhibitions? Often it doesn't. Does it mean a sale of the work? Not really, because often the people who are sharing and re-engaging with my work are people who like the work because they're artists as well. You know, is it leading to anything? Not really. Maybe a sense of like, oh, a boost for myself, you know, for 5 minutes, but then that drops off pretty quick, doesn't it? And then you just want to chase the next dopamine high, which again is all programmed in to the, you know, the platforms. It's not by chance that you get these emotional ups and downs. It's programmed in. I mean, they literally have a school called the Persuasion Tech Lab at Princeton University in the US, where a lot of these companies, you know, go and learn how to make their apps more addictive and psychologically addictive. So you've got to ask yourself, is it like attention? Is that what I really want? You know, and then therefore, what type of attention do you mean? So that's kind of one answer to that question, I think. Because if you're thinking, yeah, maybe if I get more views on this, it will lead to something. But what you could end up doing is fighting, paying with you both your money and hours of time trying to make the best social media, only for it to generate wealth for the shareholders and generate nothing for you in terms of community or in terms of sales or anything like that. However, I think I'm going to quote Amy McNee in a minute, who's a really great writer, and she just wrote a book which came out a few weeks ago called "We Need Your Art," and it's all about encouraging artists to get behind their work and share it. And she talks about she did this really clever thing on her social media account where she asked all the artists and writers that were following her if there was no like worry about the algorithm or having to make um you know, something go viral or sales or people watching, how would you use social media? And you see this like freedom in the way people were responding. They're saying things like, oh, I would, you know, start posting my sketchbook. I would not try and make these reels of me painting that I'm not really interested in. I would like show people my process. I would like, you know, maybe do a reading group with others and things like that. And then the next day she said, everything that you said about that, that's the way you should be using social media. Yeah. And I found that really encouraging because it's like, you know, in the end, if you are putting out an authentic voice in the way that you want to use social media, it will come back around to you because people are interested in who you are. Everyone's seen the viral videos over and over. It doesn't take any attention for anything. If you really want to build your following, start there with like, what do I actually want to get out of this? And I think a lot of people also are, you know, moving away from spending lots of time on social media and instead building up things like a mailing list. A mailing list is evergreen. Yeah. And it never stops being useful. People are much more willing to spend time with an email than they are with a post because the way the app's designed, it's not because of them or you or your work isn't good enough. It's designed to be fully at speed all the time. So I think it's about being comfortable with emerging slowly and not just chucking things out into the ether for them to go viral, which actually lead to nothing. Instead, slowly building up deeper connections with your audience. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But I kind of think maybe that needs an episode in itself. How do I grow my audience? because it's a question of psychology, isn't it? Well, what is my audience first? And then how do I want to do it? Thanks, JT. Okay, so the second little thing I wanted to talk about before we go into just more of a time of discussion, but please, these questions are great. Thank you so much. Please keep chucking things in and stuff like that. It's really, really great to hear your comments. I think a second aspect, particularly when it comes back to capitalism, as we were saying, and that forcing us to compete with one another, as artists, we have to begin reframing this. And one of the reasons why it's so hard to reframe or get out of this kind of mindset, I think, is because of a lack of art world transparency. And I'm saying art world transparency, but I say that again as in, not one big art world with a big heading above it, but, wherever you find yourself. But what I mean by lack of art world transparency is this. There's two great writers called Gabrielle de la Puente and Zarina Mohammed. They are known as the White Pube collectively, and they've been writing critical essays about art for years. They're absolutely amazing duo. And they've written a book called Poor Artists, which came out a few months ago last year. It's amazing. All about the artist's journey now. And it's all done through kind of interviews with lots of artists and then weaving it into a character and a story. It's fantastic. Go out and buy it straight away. But before that, they wrote a shorter book called Ideas for a New Art World, which is out on Rough Trade Press, which is brilliant. It's kind of like a pamphlet, which was also a project where they had these big billboards in the street that were like 6 different ideas, and they posted the ideas around, with the idea of getting discussion going around them. And one of the ideas was that artists with privilege, it should be displayed next to their gallery information in the gallery that they're showing in, right? And they use an example of, I won't mention the artist, you can read it yourself, but use an example of a really big show that they went to see, and they're sort of looking at the artist's lineage and how they'd worked so hard to get to this point. And they were like, God, this show's so great. And then they found out that the parent of that artist was like a really famous artist. And, they just had so much backing to get this show happening. And they said like it changed the way they felt about the exhibition, because none of that's mentioned, right? And so they said you should put next to the exhibition, by the way, this artist comes from extreme privilege, because they said the rest of us, particularly those coming from a working class background, we're fucking struggling out here, And why this is important is, coming back to social media, we see these viral posts, right, of incredible studios, thirst trap photos in front of your artwork in your massive studio, usually by yourself. Yeah, that's important to note as well. You've got massive exhibitions going on. They seem to be sort of everywhere all the time, this artist, and they seem to have endless amounts of time to work, to make art, like nothing else going on. They don't share about any day job or anything like that. And the problem is we see all that as artists, and we get in our compare and despair narratives. But, often when you're on social media, the whole thing is perception management. You have absolutely no fucking idea how another artist who's showing what seems to be authentic on Instagram or wherever else has got to the place that they are. That person could be bankrolled by a rich partner, by a huge inheritance, by wealthy parents, And I've seen a lot of this because it's not cool to share this, right? Even in the art world. And I've seen this before, even like Turner Prize winners that are written about like, oh yeah, they struggled really hard to get, to where they are, and they're from like the north of England, and it was all really difficult. And you'd search up the artist, and they made work in their dad's garage or whatever. Search up the artist, and they went to private school, $50K a year, and you're just like, even. This is no shade to someone who went to private school, no shade to someone who's got very wealthy parents or anything like that. Great situation, great for you. If you're in that situation and you can use it well, fantastic. What I mean is this sort of perception management where it looks as if you're not, and it looks as if you're just doing well for some reason. And that perception management, this is how it then comes back to us as artists not in that place of privilege and gets us into that competitive mindset, is that when privilege and backing of cash is not announced, it makes it seem like, well, if you were a real artist, you would be like them. You would have a massive studio. You know, you'd be making sales all the time. You'd seemingly have 12 hours a day to paint, and you wouldn't have to look after your kids or do 2 or 3 other jobs to sustain yourself. And you would be having your art go into all these glamorous places. And it makes it seem that, you know, that it's all again to do with you, like it's some sort of problem with you. And if you were real and really good, and if you were actually a good artist, that you would be there. But it's not like it can't be seen in that way. It's not true, because you've got no idea how the person is where they are. And then the problem is you're comparing your artistic journey, your narrative, and then eventually your own sense of identity and self-worth based on someone else who might be in massively different area of privilege to you. And we have to be so careful in these social media contexts, again, with this capitalist idea of battling against each other. You might be battling against someone where you can never win because they've got everything going for them. Yeah. On the opposite scale, you can also have everything going for you and it be the complete opposite. Like when I went to London Art Fair, when was it? I can't remember now. It was a few months ago, wasn't it? Was looking around there not long ago, and there was a show. You can see this for yourself. It's Monet's great grandson. Yeah. And it was some of the worst shit I've ever seen in my life. And I think I was with my friend, another really great artist called Amy Lung, and she was like, "Isn't it amazing how you can have, you know, you're a white male with every level of privilege you can imagine and still be really shit." Oh god. Anyway, you can market the hell out of shit work, can't you? But so yeah, privilege doesn't mean success. But often being bankrolled and having huge amounts of money and time does mean that you will get to the place you want to get to quicker, and then you'll be younger when you do it. And then because younger is very, very like exciting in the market at the moment, or maybe was 4 or 5 years ago as well, particularly through the pandemic, the younger the better, the more out of art school the better. You think, so I've got to finish art school and instantly picked up and instantly selling my work for 50K. And when you don't do it, oh well, it's your fault. You know, again, capitalism always turns the problem back on you rather than a system error. You know, a few more comments coming in. What's this one? Throg, nepo babies should just own it instead of cosplaying as a broke artist for clout. True. I saw a great thing the other day on you know, the art review power. If you've not subscribed to that on Instagram, it's really, really great. It's like sort of art satire memes, and one just said it's like they're doing this fake pretend news report, and an artist has, you know, managed to pay their studio rent for 2 months in a row from the sales of their art, and now they're nervous that they're not a real artist anymore, they're not authentic anymore, you know, because they're not struggling or something like that. So yeah, I think it's true, and that's why I like the idea of what the White Pube says about everyone's level of privilege should be shown next to the work that they sell. Oh, by the way, this artist was paid, you know, to have a flat in London while they studied and had a studio paid for by their parents, and therefore could order this stuff and get it cut out of steel or made out of glass, you know, whereas you can't, you know, you're looking in the skip for materials or whatever. You know, and yeah, it is this kind of cosplaying as broke is a major issue in the art world, because, you know, and this comes back to the previous question that Richard was asking about, you know, has it changed the market, the trad market in some sense? Well, the trad market still really thrives on sort of artist genius narratives and discovering artists, even though maybe, you know, the artist that you're bringing in and representing and selling is like your friend's son, you know what I mean, because you're all connected to each other. And that narrative is so important to continuing to generate sales. What's another comment here? Yeah, this is where one story that one can develop over time is the magic behind others buying into what you're doing. The flex always has less an effect on me personally. Yeah, it's true, and also it lasts such a short time, doesn't it? The the thirst trap image or the it's interesting because there's different types of things in different spaces. On Instagram, it's all about showing how big a studio is, and um, you know where your work's being shown. On Twitter or X, it's all about announcing how big your sales are or who the collector was. So very different kind of mindsets, but essentially the same thing. And I also think those two things as well are just so individualistic. Recently that it was that viral morning routine. You remember that guy who like wakes up at 5 a.m. or whatever, and then or 4 a.m. is it? Mouth taping, dunks his head into ice, does a swim, makes 10K, has breakfast. And people sort of laugh at that. And I think sometimes as artists, we think, oh, that's so far away from anything we could be doing, But this perception management on social media is exactly the same as that. It's identical in that, that grind set kind of guy. It's all about mm, being trusted with vast amounts of wealth and that everything you do is on your own. There's no community. There's no nothing. In that video, he doesn't connect with anyone. And in a lot of social media spaces for artists, it's about the sales you made or how big your studio is. And maybe the only other time you've got anyone else on your Instagrams when you've got a studio visit from a big gallery or whatever. And it can force us to think again, we're somehow missing it. We're somehow it's something to do with us, yeah, when it might have nothing to do with you at all, when you've got no idea what levels of privilege people have got. So as a way of rounding up then, let's think about some reframing, yeah. And I want to encourage us that we've talked about a lot of negative and cynical things today, things that are true as well, and things that might make us feel really down. But this is what's so great about artists is that we are uniquely positioned to fight against capitalism and fight against these social media structures that try and keep us separated, because art thrives under connection, with each other and bouncing ideas. Here's a quote from Amy McNee. Said I was going to quote her, who wrote, who on Instagram is her page is Inspired to Write, amazing page, and she runs lots of art courses as well. And a recent book is called We Need Your Art. But see what you think to this. Artists are not like athletes. We cannot win gold. We cannot beat other creatives. We cannot come first. Sport is objective, but our craft as artists is subjective. Creating to be the best is a waste of energy. Instead, create to connect with the people who need you. Really like that. I'm going to say that again. Instead, creating to be the best is a waste of energy. Instead, create to connect with the people who need you, because they are out there. Create in your own way, because there is no right way. Take the pressure off and focus on your unique brand of magic. Fuck. Isn't that so fucking good? I come back to that one so often. You can't win. You can't win you can't win gold. Even if you win the Turner Prize, you can't beat other artists. That isn't the point of art. And that's what social media and capitalism and this like kind of hiding nepotism and everything get us to think, is that we're all just fucking fighting each other for this limited success. Whereas the solution is create to connect with the people who need you. And that's both as other artists and viewers, because they are out there. That's a fucking art career, friends, is finding the people who connect deeply with what you're doing, not winning huge amounts of money or huge amounts of fame, which just is kind of empty, or virality or something like that. And how might that look? Okay, let's think about it in real practical terms. It could be just simply if you're feeling isolated, right? If you feel like I haven't got that artistic community, and next week question I'm going to do, how do I build an artist community? So we'll look into that more next week. But let's a little bit now is that start by just getting out there, getting off the computer if you can, and seeing some shows. It could be connecting with a gallery that you like or another artist that you like. Maybe message them and say, instead of going to the private view where it's really bit busy, maybe message them and just say, I love the show. I'm going to come and see it this week. Are you around? That's happened so many times to me. And you start that connection. Joining a class. It might be, trying something different, go to a printmaking class or whatever, and just see what happens when you start to connect and bounce ideas with people. Join a community itself. Maybe near to you, there's an art reading group, or there is a studio complex that does sort of like crit events or something like that. Just go and get involved. And, if you can't find one, then start one. You know what I mean? It can be as simple as a WhatsApp group, for like getting other artists together who are doing the same thing as you. If you're doing photography, find other photographers. If you're into abstraction, start with the people who are most interested in what you're doing. If you have the chance to move to a studio space, try and choose one that's like community led, where there's like a shared gallery space maybe, or, when you've got a chance to knock on each other's doors, or you're sharing a room with 6 other artists. It can be amazing, what comes out of it. And I can attest to that myself. And, if you are if you are homebound, if you are disabled and you're not able to leave the house at all hours of the day, then there's amazing online communities that are out there that are away from kind of the social media bubble, that you can connect with. And it's just like about not sort of seeing social media as your only way of connecting people, and trying to think further or outside the box, because they are out there. And what's then interesting about that is that there is then an element of competition within artistic community, because then true competition comes out of that, because we're all spurring each other on. You see what I mean? Not we're fighting for limited resources. We're growing a community and we're creating our own resources. We're creating our own success together. And then we experience people's wins together as if we had won it ourselves. Yeah. Rather than, fuck, why do they have what I want, or something like that. This in itself is inherently anti-capitalistic, yeah, as art communities always are. If we believe that we're just alone, that no one's coming to help, that it's only about hustle or fall behind, then we're easier controlled and stuck in that environment of capitalism's kind of separation anxiety. And it keeps us working overtime, accepting burnout, internalizing failure as a personal flaw rather than as a systemic issue. Yeah. Individualism, I saw this quote the other day, individualism keeps the shame pointed inward, not upward to the system. Yeah. Solidarity is dangerous to capitalism. Okay. So that's why we see so much effort in the world generally to undermine labor movements, protest, community action, or even just genuine connections with each other. Yeah. And that's why social media does divide us so much, because that's the way that capitalism grows. When people start coming together, and as artists, when we start coming together, realizing we don't need to play by the rules or someone to hand us approval of being an artist or an exhibition, and now you're successful, you can write your own story. And if we start seeing ourselves as in it together, organizing, unionizing, challenging who holds the power and why, who says they're the tastemaker, what you want to do with your work, that's bad for those structures, and we can begin to unravel them. And because we're artists, we're uniquely able to do that, because we can see in between the cracks. We're uniquely positioned to resist it. That's what I was saying earlier. You already live in that space between reality and imagination. You can show the cracks in the system, offer alternatives, promote empathy, build solidarity. Yeah. When we build together as collectives in mutual support, exhibitions, or just in honest conversations like we're doing now, that's radical, because that's exactly what capitalism doesn't want us to do. Yeah. So that's my thoughts for you today. For question 1, are other artists my competition or my community? They are our competition if we believe in these structures because there's no other way of them to be. But remember, you cannot win gold against other artists. And coming back to Amy McNee again, let's hear it again. Creating to be the best is a waste of energy. Instead, create to connect with the people who need you because they're out there. It's true, friends. Well, that's almost my time. Thank you so much for your comments. Is there any further questions? And while everyone's typing further questions, I'm just going to bring a couple of things up that I wanted to show you. So let's see here. So as I say, this was powered by the amazing Exchange Art. If you don't know Exchange Art, it's an amazing platform where you can sell your work digitally and also physical work as well. It's sold in good old dollars as well, but you can also sell via cryptocurrency, which is great. If that's something you want to learn more about, just drop me a line. If that's kind of first time you're hearing about this, I'm sure many of you logged on now know about Exchanger. I'm speaking to people who already know, but if you don't, neither did I a few years ago. So if you want to talk about that, just let me know. They have got a bunch more live streams this week. Also known on Twitter as Spaces. So Artist Questions, that was mine today, 9 a.m. American time. I should have said good morning, good afternoon, good evening, shouldn't I? It's 2 o'clock here in the UK now. Well, 3 now. We got Talking Trash this afternoon, which is a great kind of culture analyzing space. Really, really interesting. We've got Grind and Growth on Thursday. That's all about sort of optimizing your time, how to use your time well as creative and get the most out of what you're doing. And then Drawn to the Mic, which is all like artist interviews and all really cool spaces. And there's even more than this. That next week there'll be another 2 additional ones added on. This is just this week. So if you are interested in hearing more stuff like this, then please do log in. And then also, if you are interested in the kind of stuff that I'm talking about today, I run a podcast called The Healthy Artist. Look, you can see it's me because I'm wearing the same hat, which is my brand, which is, what the whole point of this talk was about. Branding yourself endlessly. If you're interested in sort of hearing more about maintaining a healthy relationship with your art practice, Healthy Art is a podcast I run with Martha Lamont. She is an amazing painter. You can see her in the photo there. And that's her studio, actually, as well in the background. And we do actually have a episode on social media in particular. What was Michael Nelson say? Oh, great podcast. Been listening since episode 1. Yeah, thanks, Michael. I really appreciate all your support and the messages you sent us over these episodes and tuning in and sharing. It's been such a great journey so far. And this is artist community in action, right? Martha, I'd never met her before 6 months ago. I moved into a new studio. She's in the studio next to me. And that's how it started. And we started talking about some of these issues like we're talking about now and thought, where's the place to talk about this? And we're like, let's talk about it ourselves. and it started to make something. And then of course we can invite people onto the podcast. And this is what I'm talking about, creating your own communities. Yeah, finding them, showing a new way of doing things. But yeah, we did a specific episode on social media where we looked a lot more deeply at Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism, and how social media algorithms work. So to kind of disconnect eyes. So I think if you want to hear more about that, that'd be interesting. Go and check it out. And there's also lots of other cool episodes and lots of interviews with artists that we're doing. We're currently on a break through April after our first sort of 10 episodes, and then we'll be back in May. And that's every 2 weeks. So that could be something you could enjoy as well. Yeah, and it's everywhere. So Apple, Spotify, all the usual places, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can go to thehealthyartist.com and see all the episodes there. And we got a newsletter there as well, which is more stuff like this. Well, friends, let me bring myself back up. Thank you so much for joining me. Any further questions? JT says he's a hat guy as well. Keep it on brand. I think it's both a brand statement. It's the color. That's the thing. In fact, when I was at London Art Fair, someone said, "Are you Dan from the Healthy Artist podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's amazing." And she was like, "Oh, I only noticed it was you because of that." So I'm wearing it all the time because it is my brand now, friends. Thanks, Carmati. High quality. And what it also does is, because I'm 37 now, it hides the balding spots. So that's also good, isn't it? we gotta do what we can in this life, to keep the brand intact. Love you all. Thanks for joining me on this first of Artist Questions. We'll be back next week, same time, same places. Every Wednesday, I'll be here, 9 a.m. EST, 2 p.m. UK time, which will probably be 1 p.m. UK time next week. It seems to change every week depending on where the sun is and all of that. But anyway, you can log in via the YouTube or on Twitter. 37 on Friday. Well done, Papa. Full head of hair and beard, though. Well, why don't this is artist community, right? So why don't you share some of that hair around? Have you thought about that? Really? Instead of bragging on about all the hair you've got. But I am the beard is looking good though. That so I'm pleased about that. And I found a good barbers recently that does the old school like beard shaving. So that's quite cool as well. Which always makes me a bit anxious, when they suddenly get razor blades out and you're suddenly like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? If you've got a full head of hair or not, I love you. Have a great rest of your day. Nearly 200 of you on here this morning. That is wild to me. So thank you so much. Great spaces going on through the rest of the week and next week. Thanks again to Exchange Art and Bonk Art Masters. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.